everybody, all the Stooge fans, all the knuckleheads out there. Congratulations. You have joined once again the Three Stooges official podcast. I am your host, as always, the Maestro of Mayhem, Phil Lanides, and alongside me are the true talents, 2/3 of the modern day Three Stooges, Andy Pagana, and the grandson of Curly Howard, Mr. Brad Server. Gentlemen, welcome.
Oh, who walked in?
Who came in?
Oh, hiya, Phil. Hiya, fans. Hiya, pals.
Oh, man. I'm looking forward to this. On today's show, we are going to be doing our very first rewatch episode. Now, we're not going to sit down and watch the shorts together because none of us has thousands of dollars to pay for the licensing fee for that. But maybe Curly. But we are going to look back at one of my all-time favorites of the classic shorts, You Nasty Spy. Brad and Andy, just before we jump into all this, is this one of your favorites too? What are your thoughts on You Nasty Spy?
Nazi Spy? I mean, first of all, classic, right? This is Andy P, by the way. Classic. This is one of the best and one of the most well-known, one of the most iconic. I mean, this is the poster. I had the poster of the Stooges from this one in my room as a kid where their hands are on the handle. I actually got a picture here that Kurt gave us from our last podcast. Those of you listening at home can't see it, but the video guys, so this poster like hung on my wall, and it's like iconic Three Stooges. It's
absolutely
super funny.
Yeah, hilarious. And actually, traditionally for me, Men in Black, Disorder in the Court, Dizzy Pilots, those always seem to be the ones that always came to mind. And until I kind of rewatched this just to freshen up on it before we did this, I had forgotten how funny this episode actually is. It's actually, right now, it's topping maybe my favorite because in some of the other episodes, I found myself, I don't want to use the word bored, but there were some spots where it dropped off a little bit. I found myself entertained through every second of this video. And I don't know if it was the parody when I was younger or growing up, the parody with the Hitler thing that kind of kept me away from it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the reason why I never really just kept focusing on this one, but I have to say it probably is one of my favorite episodes now.
Yeah, you called me last week, right? And you were like, I watched this multiple times today. And you were like laughing. You were laughing on the phone, going over some of the bits.
Everything was so funny. And Curly was hilarious. And of course, the Mo thing when he transforms into his character was shocking yet brilliant.
Yeah.
And then I found myself focusing then more on the writing aspect of it. And it was so great. So I'm thrilled that we're talking about this today.
Yeah, we're going to dive into this one. It is, to your point, I think it's one of those ones where you probably have more appreciation of it after you've studied World War II in high school, that it's going to be a little funnier than it is to my 7-year-old and 6-year-old who don't think it's funny because they don't know who Hitler is and don't get it. So, but here we go. We're going to dive into all this to let the listeners and the viewers know we're going to do something a little bit different on these types of episodes. We're going to kind of awards to hand out, VIP, the Fourth Stooge, most rewatchable sequence, a few others. So we'll get to those later in the episode. So that's something to look forward to. But without further ado, let's get to it. Here's a summary. This is courtesy of threestooges.net. Set in the country of Moronica, which is awesome. 3 men plot to overthrow their king and appoint a dictator. Their choice is a paper hanger named Mo Hailstone, with Curly as his field marshal and Larry as his minister of propaganda. The boys take control of the country. The citizens are unhappy and drive Hailstone out of power. To get down to some of the nuts and bolts, this was directed by Jules White, written by Clyde Brookman and Felix Adler, and it was released on January 19th, 1940, and was the first American comedy film that satirized Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. So, as I'm sure both of you gentlemen know, the Charlie Chaplin classic film, The Great Dictator, that received a lot more attention, and it's often cited as credited as the first film to really go after Hitler and Nazi Germany, but the Stooges beat him to it by 9 months. It's a little bit of a technicality because Chaplin's was a full-length feature and it took longer to do, so it actually started production before this. But as we know with the Stooges, they would film and it would be out pretty much the next month usually. So this was filmed in December and then came out in January. But Mo playing Mo Hailstone, he's also the first American actor to spoof Hitler. So pretty amazing and really kind of an important, an important cultural moment. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but to me that makes this really one of the most important Stooge films, which you don't hear the term important associated with the Stooges very often, but this really was.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Obviously, The Great Dictator is one of the great Chaplin movies, one of the greatest movies of all time, somewhere in there for sure. And he's obviously worked on this a lot more longer. And, Chaplin, obviously he had a lot to say, really, and it dealt with, true death and stuff like that with Chaplin. But, the Three Stooges getting in there, and even without the Hitler reference, it's a spoof on war and it's a spoof on dictatorship. And this would have worked, I think, just as well in like 1933 as a, like the Marx Brothers Duck Soup, which this reminds me of a lot, right? Where it's just this, spoof on the money of war, right?
The war profiteering,
right? Exactly. And so I think even without the Hitler references, there's a version of this that could have worked literally at any point in time. It could work today.
Yeah,
right? Actually, Brad pointed out earlier to me. He says this feels so relevant.
Yeah, a lot of the writing seems so relevant. There's no money and peace. And stuff like that. I mean, that really is kind of not talking about politics, just what really is the culture of war. And
somebody's making money. Yeah, somebody's making money. And when they're sitting around at the beginning, not the Stooges, but the Ixnay, Amscray, and the other guy I can't remember right now. When they when they're sitting, when they're sitting around and they're saying like there's no money and peace.
But we must remember that the kingdom of Moronica is at peace, Mr. Ixnay.
You're right, Mr. Amscray. But there's no money in peace.
It's like that's. Cuts kind of.
You've only made $5 million.
Right.
We're practically starving.
We're practically right, and it's about like elitism and there's a lot in there actually, even though they're being funny about it. And to give some more historical context about the timing of this film, the U.S. had not been attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor as of yet. That would not come until later in the year. Or I'm sorry, the next year. And this was less than 25 years after the end of World War I. The U.S. was still a neutral force. A lot of people that don't know this time frame think that like just everybody just rose up against Hitler, but no, he was in power and building power and lying about it for quite a while. And no one stood up to him until kind of England and some others. But it took a lot to get the U.S. There were a lot of pacifists. There were even rallies in the U.S. in favor of Hitler and in favor of Nazism. So, and we haven't mentioned it, but the Stooges were all Jewish. So even this had to be a really personal thing to them as well. So it's very interesting. It's also very unique that, as we've been talking about, the Stooges, and we could talk, I think we could probably do an episode around it at some point, but the Stooges didn't directly touch on culture all that often. There was a lot about the Great Depression indirectly. As we all know, the Stooges were often played poor characters or poor people in their films. But as far as taking on like a really direct political thing that was going on, I can't really think of anything else that even comes close to this. So
no, there wasn't a ton of social commentary.
Right.
In the Stooges, right, outside of those years of them, begging and living on the streets, during the Great Depression. But this one is unique in that way.
Yeah, and for them, I think it was very brave, obviously, of Jules White. I'm assuming we said wrote this or produced
correct.
It.
He directed it. He directed
it was very brave at the time. And sometimes when if I reflected now, and I still sometimes wonder how such a horrific event could be taking place for several years. And, I wasn't obviously born yet. So as an American or as sitting now saying, how did they not say anything or do anything? And it really, it's still to this day, it blows my mind, except for there are atrocities that are going on in other countries and we're kind of doing nothing about it now. So I guess if it's out of sight, it's out of mind or something. So it kind of is, it's interesting. It's all kind of just like what was going on when they wrote this is kind of going on today.
Yeah.
That is kind of still going on today. There's a lot of bad things in countries that really we should be standing up for as a society and as all Americans. And we're not. We're either not talking about it or we're shutting our ears to it. But I can see now why it happened, and it's disgraceful, actually.
And to make the decision to actually it be not having him rise to power, but him being installed, you know, as a puppet regime, right, by rich people who want to manipulate him behind the scenes is an interesting choice too, right? It really is amazing. It's just you realize nothing changes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'd be going really deep state if we were to say that happened. That was accurate here, because it doesn't seem like anybody was propping Hitler up necessarily. But you know, hey, who knows? But to your point, Brad, there's no oil in some of the conflicts that are going on in the world today. And again, to be more kind of like on the critical side, and we're not planning on getting real political on this podcast, but some would make the case that, you know, we don't get involved unless we got something to benefit from it.
Yeah. No politics.
No politics.
No politics.
Yeah.
This ain't a dinner table. I was only told at the dinner table I couldn't do politics. I wasn't being political. I was just being honest. Isn't there a difference?
I don't know.
Will I get slapped for being honest?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Good night.
Oh. Sorry, folks. I was just voicing my opinion.
Yeah, you ain't got one. All right. So I do have to mention Brent Seguin, who is one of the like creme de la creme of the Stooges super fans out there. He messaged me directly and wanted to make sure that I mentioned this, but there was a tabloid story published in 1992 that claimed that the Stooges, who, as we all we already mentioned, we're all Jewish, had been added to an Adolf Hitler quote unquote death list as a result of making You Nazi Spy. This is simply untrue, but it has been repeated in other books and articles, and so it still floats out there, but it is not true. So we want to put a pin in that right now.
Right. It's like did we talk about the Curly rumor where he saved like 5,000 dogs or something?
Yeah. We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah. So it is. That's the other kind of rumor that's going around. And supposedly that's not true. But I think out of all the myths about the Stooges, like, hey, let it go. Let that one be out there. Let people think that this.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, because honestly, they were brave to do that. It wasn't let's all rally against Hitler in 1940.
Right.
And that one also got heavily criticized, I believe.
Right.
People wanted to stay out of that. So yeah, I think that's a harmless rumor that us fans know are fake. But if people are out there who aren't super fans of the Three Stooges come across that and like, oh yeah, good for the boys. Maybe it'll get them to watch next time they happen upon it on TV or YouTube.
Yeah, and not to take away from Curly being a huge fan of dogs and loving dogs. He did rescue a lot of dogs, and he brought them home, or he'd actually bring them to shelters or go to shelters. But the number was exaggerated by about 3 zeros, or it was more probably like 50 dogs. I don't even know that even got to 100, but let's say it's 50, not 5,000. But, it's a great rumor to have. And he was definitely a sweet man, and he loved his quiet time in his backyard with his dogs. So I think it just kind of embraces who he is. And it's a great rumor.
Yeah. It adds to the legend for sure. Yeah. All right, let's talk about some of the supporting players in this. So, Dick Curtis as Mr. One, Don Beto as Mr. Amscray, Richard Fisk as Mr. Ixnay, and Fisk is one of my favorites. He wasn't in a ton of them because he actually died in World War II, and we'll get to that. But I really liked how angry Richard Fisk would get at the Stooges. But he played Mr. Ixnay. The beautiful Lorna Gray as Maddie Herring, which was a take on Mata
Hari.
Yeah, Mata Hari.
Yeah.
And then Florine Dixon as Miss Pfeffernuss. Yeah, she did a good job as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about them, but just some quick hits in terms of trivia. This was the first short to feature the Columbia logo and the Stooges heads together during the opening credits, which was interesting. This is the favorite short of Mo, Larry, and Jules White, all according to Joan, Mo's daughter. She wrote in her books that this was the favorite for Mo and Larry, and then again Jules White for sure, which I'm sure that's a question that's been asked by many. I have no idea if Curly ever expressed which one was his favorite. I have no idea on that one. So if
I always thought Larry's was Cuckoo on a Choo Choo.
This was in the book of scripts. It says Joan wrote that it was Larry. So who knows, but I've heard that as well. So I don't know. And unfortunately all the players are no longer with us. We don't know for sure, but
I could understand why for multiple reasons why Larry would find this his favorite. He's also, he's like, I don't know, extra funny in it. Maybe it's just, you start watching more and more Larry and he is so good in this.
Yeah.
When Mo, this is probably my favorite moment. I'm sure this is supposed to come up later in the podcast, but when Mo's like, hold this, and he clamps the pliers
on his nose.
Larry grabs it and holds it and kind of stumbles.
Walks himself off. Yeah.
Hilarious.
Oh.
Oh. Yeah, but
give him one.
That cracks me up.
Yeah, I love that one. I also love the phrase "Moronica" for morons. That is funny by itself, but that was the Nazi slogan was Germany for Germans. So obviously that was a takeoff on that, which made sense. And then we had a little person to be politically correct. We had a little person in this episode, Little Billy Rhodes. He played the Gestapo little person. He appeared in 2 Stooges shorts. This was the second one. The first one. Do either of you remember which one was the first one that he appeared in?
Oh no! Wait, no, yeah, Men in Black.
That's correct.
I am correct. Not. I'm in a bed.
Yeah. He played the little girl. Yeah.
Right.
He played the little girl in the bed. Yep. But
it's funny. Yeah, it's you don't realize how many supporting players are in this short actually because the Stooges just steal
dominate.
Show.
Yeah, they just dominate.
Right.
This
He's
one.
in there and all the politicians and then the secretary and the
Matahari. Yep. Matahari.
And then the stormtroopers.
Yeah, the stormtroopers, which we'll get to that on that. But Little Billy Rhodes actually was the Munchkin barrister in The Wizard of Oz. That was his best known role, and that was released the year before this. So he was on quite a hot streak. And then, of course, Mo Hailstorm was, as we mentioned, was based on Adolf Hitler. Curly's Field Marshal Gallstone represented both Hermann Göring and a little bit of Benito Mussolini in there. Yeah. And then Larry's Minister of Propaganda, Pebble, was so you got Hailstone, Gallstone, and Pebble. He was a representation of Joseph Goebbels, who was, of course, Hitler's propaganda man. I also found a little interesting footnote. The Stooges play paper hangers at the beginning of this. It's not agreed upon, but apparently there are some that say that Hitler was a paper hanger before he rose to power in his previous life. So kind of interesting there.
Right. And I'm not sure if that's a coincidence or not, even if that were true.
Yeah.
Right. The Stooges play like they're paper hangers. It's a perfect job for them. And in fact, I'm sure you've read the script, Phil, but there was actually a whole scene with them wallpapering, right? That was originally in that script. It cut to basically they're just finishing up,
right?
But in the script, and I don't know if it was ever filmed or not, but they had this whole business, and Curly's, one long piece of wallpaper going from one wall down to the floor and then up the other side. And, a lot of slapstick.
Sounds like something we are putting out.
Yeah.
So
you guys need to film that. I would like to see that.
Well, we have something similar coming soon, but we'll talk about that some other time.
All right. All right. So get into some of the episode notes. So we all know the Stooges were pretty short there. Mo was only 5'4". I sometimes wonder if they picked taller guys to be the supporting players on purpose for some of them. I mean, Richard Fisk, Dick Curtis, Don Beto, I mean, they are just so much taller. And the guys, they tower of them, obviously, but Jameson, Vernon Dent, they were also pretty big guys too. So I sometimes wonder how much, but for whatever reason, this short, it really, really sticks out to me how short the boys were in comparison to some of the other guys. And I think it adds to it. I think it helps.
They may have done that on purpose because they, like you said, they're significantly smaller. These guys were towering like basketball players compared to them. Where in some of the other ones, it doesn't look, like you said, so pronounced.
Right.
But yeah, you definitely see that in that scene.
You have to think it's like a little man syndrome thing for Hellstone. You know what I'm saying? That he's like power hungry and all this stuff. So make him look even shorter and more. It just makes him look more ridiculous, I think.
It doesn't, it's just visually funny. Yeah. It's just visually funny,
And it's one of those things with this one, and again, in particular, because you're lampooning somebody who's a real life villain, that you're taking shots at the character, not just for laughs, but to make them look bad. And that is another thing I think that is very, very unique about this episode, is that you've got comedy, whether it's visual or verbal or physical or whatever, that it seems to be set up to make them look bad, and that's I think that's pretty unique and interesting as well.
Well, I don't think anything demonstrates that even better than actually the actual stormtroopers who are coming in, right, and kicking each other in the butts. Like
wearing storm
gear, just being complete idiots. They're really digging not only at Hitler and his regime, but the entire, Nazi party.
Lots of Yiddish in this one. I
they do that.
I don't know if either of you are Jewish. I am not, but I did not understand, any of that. And it has been translated, and like threestooges.net has some translations of it, and I don't understand even with the translations what the inferences were, but lots of Yiddish in this one for sure.
You had one.
It was Beblok.
Yeah, that's beans.
Beblok a lot, and that's lentils or beans is what they said the translation was. Now, once you know that, and then you go back and you see the scenes when they say it, because this Curly actually says it to the statue when the statue moves and puts out his hand.
Beblach.
And it's like, what does beans have to do with that?
Yeah.
But that was one instance. Yeah. So,
but I think they use Yiddish as gibberish, don't they?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think so.
Throughout the Stooges.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also read somewhere that Mo's nickname, or Helen, Mo's wife, her nickname for Mo was Beans.
I think you're right.
I read that somewhere. Yeah.
I think he called her Beans. Right. And it's in some of his poetry and stuff that he wrote, or maybe your bean or something. He might have called himself that. You're right. We got to look that up, but
that would make sense.
There is something between them, that one of them was beans.
Yeah. And they would throw in those little Yiddish words that actually to the show, it might not have been a word that made any sense, but they enjoyed it and it was part of their life. So of course it would be quick witted, especially when Curly, like in a lot of his skits, was going off script because he couldn't remember his lines like me. So of course they would think of things that came right to mind, and that would be their everyday life stuff that they kibitz about, or what they call their families or say to their friends and loved ones.
Yeah. You guys mentioned the statue in white. I kind of felt bad for him. I mean, that must have taken forever to get him made up like that. And he's on camera for what, like 10 seconds? Like I kind of felt bad for the guy.
That's such a great bit, though. It's such a great bit. And that's what's weird about this one in particular. Stooges do those kind of bits throughout, but this is one of the zaniest all around. It felt like a Marx Brothers movie, right? To go back to Duck Soup a little bit, like bits like that. The whole movie's like that.
Yeah.
Right? And they're not always like that. Which is like, we need the round table, but the tables are square. Saw off the table. Yeah. It's not always that. It's usually like they're thinking, they're a little more, calculated and trying to make something work. But this is just, nonstop silliness throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, one after the next.
Yeah.
That's why I said, I really found that there was no dead spots in this short at all. Everything was entertaining about it, and they just kept coming.
Yeah, they this is to your, I agree with both of you. There's it was like a gag every other second, and in some of them, you could see there was a slow build towards the gag. In not in this episode, meaning, but in normally there seemed to be more of a slow build towards the gag, and this one it's like screwball comedy, like just like you said, like the Marx Brothers, like every other second. I think, especially Groucho, I think he would have fit very, very well into this episode.
Yeah, completely. Like the Gestapo, the stormtroopers. Again, it's not usually the side characters like that are as zany as they are.
Oh, right,
right, and that totally sticks out.
Yeah,
I would probably guess, just in thinking about films and filmmakers, that I would bet that Mel Brooks, this may have been one of Mel Brooks's favorites, because there's a lot of parody to what he does in his movies, History of the World and some of the other ones, that the stormtroopers, and all this stuff. He's done that. He's used that kind of stuff. Not
sure
exactly, but I'm sure he got a lot of his
to be or not to be.
Yeah, right? I mean, a lot of his material, I'm sure he learned from the Stooges.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. For sure. It feels like a Mel Brooks.
This episode for sure, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a real good point.
Well, we'll get him on the podcast to talk about it. Larry, as the propagandist, as Pebble holding the cheers and applause and his placards while Mo Hailstone is speaking. I love that. And when he holds up the wrong sign and Mo, gets him for it, I had to mention that as one of my favorite gags in this whole thing. Because again, going back to making the villains look like bad guys. I mean, what's more, I'm going to say, obviously there's much more villainous things than that, but how else can you make them look bad by not only are they propped up, but they're even trying to make the crowd, do what they want, which Hitler did do that kind of stuff. So that was hilarious to me and very spot on. And I'm glad it was Larry holding up the sign because I feel like his enthusiasm when he held it up was it was great. So I love that.
That's a funny bit. And then it goes into, again, like, Mo gives him a good kick and he, clonks him on the head at one point. And then, then they go into this weird radio bit.
Yeah.
Right? Where Curly openly takes off his head and Larry clonks him on it for the radio identification. And Mo does this, crazy, whatever.
Which I did. That's one of the, and I did not get that. That was one of those things where that is like a timely reference for that time that I just didn't get. I'm like, I don't understand what we're doing here, but yeah.
And somehow it still is
funny.
Super entertaining. I don't know.
I don't think I ever got it either, but it's funny.
Yeah. And then Andy, you mentioned Mo putting the pliers on Larry's nose, and Larry could have just stood there and held him and it would have been funny, but the fact that he led himself off.
Right. And how he does it.
Yeah.
Right. And how he kind of he stumbles off.
Right.
It's absolutely hilarious. I actually watched this. I watched this 3 times in a row. And you said you watched it a couple times, right? Yeah. I watched it 3. 1 to watch Mo, 1 to watch Curly, and 1 to watch Larry, because they're all doing these things, and to focus on one, it's kind of hard, right? Because especially when they're all together, it's like if you're watching Mo, during the dance, you're missing what Curly's doing. If you're watching Larry, you're missing what Mo's doing, right? So it's really funny. They're so committed in this.
Yeah,
and I guess they always are, but they're really
they're really
on another level.
Yeah, and I think that's what the thing is about the Three Stooges and people watching them for so many years and not getting bored. That because the writing was so brilliant and the way it's produced, there's little hidden things and you could, like what you did, is actually just watch it each time to watch each character, but you also are missing stuff that's going on in the backgrounds, whether it's little signs or I bet there's props and stuff that we've never really just dove into, where you cover the characters and we just saw the backgrounds. I bet there's brilliant stuff in there just hiding.
Yeah.
Like Finding Waldo in the short.
Well, speaking of that, there are a few other kind of gimmicks or gags in this that I wanted to quickly mention. We already mentioned the stormtroopers being in actual storm gear and they high step and kick each other in the butt. That's awesome. Curly had so many medals that he had some pinned on his back. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but that was hilarious.
Mine too. Big one.
Which again is another shot at, Goring in that sense, that it was like, we got 80,000 medals and probably never served type of thing. But that was That was pretty awesome. I paused it on Curly's little black book.
Let me see that. June East, 110 Good Necking Place. Whoopee 4430.
These are kind of risque, to be honest with you. June East, 110 Good Necking Place. Whoopee 4430. Ruby Clutch OOOG has car. I don't know what the OOG means, but I read somewhere that was suggested that was like a bra size. But has car. I'm like, I've never heard of that before, but has car often runs out of gas. Woo, 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 which is awesome. And then finally, Tessie Oomph 269. Pip buys own drinks. So kind of risque, and also funny that like, oh, she has her own car, so great, I don't have to pick her up, but she often runs out of gas, which means they sit neck, and then obviously buys own drinks, so you don't have to buy them. So there's kind of cheapskate funny stuff right there, but then I think the funniest in all that stuff is that like Mo's reading it, right? And he reads woo, 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 woo. Yeah. And then Curly, and in the most subtle way, like really, I don't remember him ever doing this. He's like explaining it to Mo by just going, woo, woo, woo.
Woo, woo, woo. Woo, woo, woo. Woo, woo, woo. I'll keep this.
Right, like what happened with her.
right
And it's weirdly like for the Stooges, it's so subtle.
Yeah.
And it's so brilliant.
Yeah, and no one would ever accuse the Stooges of being subtle. So yeah, but that's a good call. All right, before we get to the awards, we have to mention Lorna Gray. Just a showstopper. I can't think of a better term when she walks in the room. Like, she's just a very, very beautiful, attractive woman, and I thought she did a great job. I did read a quick note. So for those that haven't watched the episode yet or haven't watched in a while, she does the Magic 8-Ball thing. That actually didn't become a toy for like another 10 years. So it was kind of interesting that they kind of inserted that in there. But I thought, obviously she was in other Stooge shorts, but I thought she did such an awesome job. And she stood out in a very male dominated, other than Miss Pfeffernuss, who also did an awesome job as the kind of ballerina secretary. But both the ladies in this one, I think, really stood out and did a fantastic job. All right, so let's get into the awards. So we're gonna try this out and see how this goes. But the first one is the VIP, kind of the most valuable player type. Really, what's the who had kind of the most important role in the film? We touched on it briefly. Andy, you mentioned Mo turning into Mo Hailstone, and I think that is brilliant. I mean, the way that he kind of stuck the little mustache to his lip, which was, I don't know what that was, but something that he stuck, and then he kind of
a piece of tape.
All right. So yeah, a piece of black electrical tape, and then he smooths his hair back so it's kind of parted like Hitler. Like, I thought that was brilliant when he yells and he fick nine goes out there. Like, he sounds like Hitler. Like, so to me, it's got to be Mo. I think he's the most important character in this one. But Andy, what did you think?
I gotta give it to Mo too. I mean, Mo cries in this one.
How can I throw anyone to the lions when we have no lions?
Oh, don't worry, little fella.
Right? Can I have any lions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mo goes through all the ranges, and he's spoofing Hitler. He's commanding this army. He's acting like a baby. He's got real emotion when he finds out that Mata Haring is trying to kill him. Like, he has a real reaction, and when he's dealing with the guys at the end and having Curly, bump him on the head with the thing, he's delegating, and he's, kind of in a weird way, like subtly telling Curly to, clonk these guys. He had this whole hidden language very subtly, and it's funny because they're all great in this. They're all so great in this. And I could see if somebody makes an argument for anybody else, but I do. I got to give it to Mo. He carried this, and he could have carried it on his own.
All right, Brad, do you agree with us, or you're wrong?
Yeah, I'm wrong. I didn't even say anything there. Oh, how could you? Yeah, I mean, definitely Mo, and for me, the transformation, like you said, when he transformed his character into the Hitler character, I think right there again, it was kind of a shocking moment. But then he just there again carries that character throughout, and then he, like Andy said, he turns into so many different characters in that short. But yeah, I would say that he was definitely the VIP for me and for the three of us.
Okay, we're all in agreement there. All right, the fourth Stooge, or basically the best supporting player. A lot of the Stooges shorts, there is a standout. Like and pretty much anyone that Emil Sitka is in, like he's kind of the the standout. Bud Jameson is probably my favorite. As far as a foil goes for the Stooges. So who kind of really stands out? This one. The Stooges are the stars in this one. Like the most of the other characters are pretty like relegated to the background for the most part. But for this one, I'm gonna go with Lorna Gray as Maddie Herring because I think she did the most with what she had. You could make a case for Little Billy Rhodes, but it was such a small part. So I got to go with Lorna Gray as Maddie Herring. But Brad, who did you think on this one?
Well, only because I'm a moron. I went with the most with the least. I found Statue Man to be the fourth Stooge. Yeah. I mean, look, he was really handsome, right? And like you said, he probably was in wardrobe and makeup for like 3 or 4 hours for that little part. So I want to give the fourth Stooge to Statue Man.
Actually, it's a weirdly good answer.
Yeah.
Right? It is. Well, because they're like, I can't even actually picture like Lorna right now, right? But him, I could totally picture.
I'll picture her for you. Don't worry about it.
No. Look, she was great, right? And I gotta agree with you, Phil, that I think she gets it, although I wasn't even considering Statue Man.
I didn't think of that
Miss
either.
Peppernoose is a right behind because it's just such a wacky part, right?
Yeah.
And she comes in and owns it, and it's super great. Yeah, I guess by default, if I had to give it to somebody, I want to give it to the Stooges. I want to give them, you know what? You just deserve the extra.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think on every one of these, when we do a recap and we do the fourth Stooge, I'm not going to be always picking the most idiotic choice. And there again, I think it is too that I think, like you had said, Phil, that all of the supporting actors in this each had an equally great part. And I think that they were all important. And I know Lorna was exquisite and she was the head one, but I think they all did really, really well. But it's just something about Statue Man that's got me bastard.
I did not see that one coming. All right.
There.
Moving on, most rewatchable sequence. So kind of your favorite sequence. And this, I feel like this is going to end up being our favorite award just because it's like we get to talk about the gags that are in it. But we haven't talked about it yet. I love the title page at the beginning. It said, quote, any resemblance between the characters in this picture and any person's living or dead is a miracle. And that is hilarious to me. So I'm not saying it's the best gag, but I'm going to say that I'm going to name that as my favorite because the more obvious ones we've kind of already talked about. So I guess that's my version of Statue Man in my answer there. I already mentioned Mo transforming into Mo Hailstone. Like I just absolutely love that. But Andy, do you have a thought on favorite sequence?
I do have a favorite, and I'm just going to say by default, I'm going to put away the map, right? The map.
Which we haven't even talked about, but
right. Just because we haven't talked about it, and it's like that's such classic Stooge stuff, and it just makes you laugh. But I think my favorite moment, and I got a couple of them in here, but it's got to be the secretary. Give me the secretary, and then Larry just starts arguing with Mo. It's pronounced secretary.
Ring for my secretary.
You mean secretary?
I said secretary.
Secretary.
Which is correct?
Stenographer.
Right. And I remember reading that, and that bit was written for Curly, and Curly to be correcting Mo. And it's such a weird, it's written weird. It's like, why is this even in here? Why is it funny? I don't really know. And then I watch it, and I watch Larry just stand up to Mo and how he pronounces secretary. And that is stuck into my head ever since I was a little kid, right? Larry's correcting him, and Mo arguing with him about how to pronounce secretary. There's something about that just absolutely cracks me up.
All right, Brad.
For me, the part when Curly goes to mix the martinis and he's in that scene, for me, the movements that Curly makes and the way he's just his mannerisms, his body shakes, he's shaking his booty, he's doing all kinds of funny stuff when you just watch that, the 40 seconds or 30 seconds. So I found myself laughing, and just that was Curly for me when he was doing that. And so I can definitely say that was one of my favorite parts of the short.
Okay. All right. A couple more here. So we're going to call this the "Don't Quote Me on This," your favorite quote. So for me, when Hailstone's giving the speech,
we must extend our neighbors a helping hand. We will extend them 2 helping hands and help ourselves to our neighbors.
I love that. And again, that was something that Hitler had essentially said in a way, talking about their, why they were going to take over, Poland and Czechoslovakia. He'd actually said things like that. So that's hilarious to me. With an honorable mention for on the Matty Herring note, it says there's a sale on poison at the Cutthroat drugstore, which is just so on the nose and hilarious. I love that. So those are kind of the standout quotes for me. But Brad, what kind of jumps out at you as far as favorite quote?
I don't know, Andy. There's so many. I can't pick one.
Why don't you pick 2?
No. Oh, okay. I think right off the bat there was a Stooge line. Actually, the Stooges didn't say it, but it was so stoogey right off the bat. I think it was at the beginning.
We must find someone who is stupid enough to do what we tell him.
Oh, but where can we find anyone that stupid, Mr. O'Neill?
I don't know. That must be in a lot of the shorts, but it was just funny, right? And then when I saw the wallpapering, because there's just been a lot of wallpapering stuff going on. I found that very funny. Can I have a uniform and a real sword? You can have 100 uniforms. Just go out and shoot 100 generals. I'll shoot 200 generals.
I'll shoot 200 generals.
The machine gun?
Yeah.
I love that.
What's that?
It's a machine gun.
Let me see.
All right, Andy.
Oh boy, I don't know. You're bringing up a bunch I forgot. I'm like, oh, that's good. That's funny. That's funny. Man, there's so many good ones. I always liked there are no bones in ice cream because there are no bones in ice cream. But I realized because it just felt like such nonsense, but it wasn't really a Stooge line. Like
no, that was a legit, yeah.
And I didn't realize that was a real saying that, right, to say, I don't know, to have a nonsense answer for a question that you couldn't answer, I guess, right? The multiple ways to use that. So it kind of, even as funny as it is, it just kind of lost something for me a little bit, knowing that wasn't like a wacky Stooge original. There's one like little throwaway line that I read in the script that I was like, oh, this would have been great in the movie. And then I hear it. Curly says it.
What's the matter with him? He's a little grouchy. Got up on the wrong side of the gutter this morning.
Yeah.
Right. And I missed it. I must have seen this short 100 times and I've never picked up on it. And it's just such a little line, right? It's a little small line, but it clues you into who these guys are. And it's a funny line. And it's one I'm going to steal just when the next time I run into a grumpy friend.
This is part of the reason why I love doing this with you guys, because you guys are both actors. I know that, Andy, you have directed and will direct things, so you guys have a different point of view, as we've talked about. You guys are 2 of the Stooges today, so I love, like, just from an actor standpoint, getting those little things, because I don't, I've done some community theater, but I'm, nothing near you guys, so I love hearing that kind of stuff. All right. So our final award for this episode, this is really more of a question, but could this have been a full-length film? As we know, the Stooges didn't get into full-length films until after their shorts deal was up in 1957. And so, we got to see some of those. So we're going to kind of ask the question, could some of their classic shorts been made into a full-length featured film? This is one of the ones where I will say yes, because I think it would be fascinating to see the background stories of the Mo, Larry, and Curly characters, and kind of how they got to be, where they were in that position to begin with, and then of course, we know what happened to him at the end with the Lions, but it would be really, really interesting to see kind of those backstories. And I don't think we can say that about a ton of the classic shorts. So my vote would be yes. I would love to see this as a full length feature film. But Andy, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think for sure. I've never really been someone who wanted to see Stooge features just because I've enjoyed their shorts so much.
Yep.
Right. But then I look at, some of the, like the Marx Brothers or Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. And I'm like, I mean, if they could do it, Stooges easily could have done that. And this one is ripe.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. This is one is like you said, it's easily, I think, made into, and they basically, they went and did You'll Never Heil Again. Right. And they kept going with this kind of bit where actually Mo wears the mustache, I think, the whole short.
Right? I think that's right. I think that's right.
And, this could have turned into anything. They could have turned into spies. They could have realized that they were puppets and they're going to bring down the army. They could have stayed, the bad guys. There's so many things so many ways this short could have gone as a feature. And I think maybe had they done it, it's not going to have, I think, what Chaplin had, right? Which is, he had a lot of sentimental stuff in his movies. And I absolutely love that. I don't think the Stooges really would have gone for that in that era anyway, but they wouldn't have needed to. I think for sure they could have turned this into something that would be on the level of The Great Dictator, even without that element to it.
Yeah. Brad, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think there again, going back to this short, because it was packed with so much comedy and throughout the whole short there, for me, like I said, there wasn't any dead spots. That just proves that they could add other material and other things to get you more involved with the characters. Like you said, I mean, it could start out like when they used to show scenes from World War II or something in black and white, where it was actually showing the war scenes at the beginning, and then it would go maybe into the office, or it could have been, they could have added so much to get into more details about, just World War II to begin with before they came in to the office. And then, like you guys are saying, with each of the characters. And I think that there's some of the other shorts that I would definitely say they couldn't stretch into one, but I think out of a lot of them or all of them, this would definitely be one that you could definitely make a full feature film in. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I think we're all in agreement on that. So we'll get the contracts together and we'll get that.
Let's make it hurt. Success. Oh, poison.
How mighty you.
Oh, hey, wee.
Big lots.
It was noisy.
All right, so we are at the end of this, so we got just a little bit of wrap-up info. So Mo's script for You Nasty Spy was included in one of the two published Three Stooges books of scripts that Joan had put together. It's fascinating to see. There it is, right there. It's really interesting to see how much the final film changed, from the script, or how little it changed. So perhaps we will delve into that in another episode at another time. So I did want to mention that. Don't forget to get your Stooge merch at shopknuckleheads.com, where you can save 10% from our good friend, Kurt. He put that code together for us. So it's Loyal10. Put in Loyal10 and you will save 10%. All right. And then, of course, you can see my awesome two co-hosts here, Brad and Andy, regularly on Thursday evenings. As long as YouTube is working, you can see them on Stooge Live and watch them go through a bunch of really cool stuff on there. You get to see just all kinds of mayhem. I think that's really the right word for it. So that happens. What time does that happen on Thursdays on YouTube?
It's not a good time. It's usually when Brad gets out of work.
Hey, we're usually going on around between 6 and 7 if there's any technical difficulty.
Yes.
But it's always fun. Even if they are having technical difficulties, you can interact with everybody and chat with everybody that's tuned in and waiting on them. So it's always fun. So
Instagram, we have the greatest fans in the world, and everyone that tunes in, they're so engaging and they're so nice and sincere. So we'd love to have everybody join us.
Absolutely. So at Curly's Grandson on YouTube and Instagram, and you can check out the group on Facebook, Curly's Grandson's Corner. You can check that as well. I am also on Instagram and Facebook. You can look up at Stooges Pod, at Stooges Pod, and then also StoogesPod.com. That is the home of this podcast. You can sign up for our newsletter there, and we will have a lot more cool stuff coming your way. But with that, gentlemen, I always call you gentlemen. I know, and it's like, who came in? But I appreciate being able to do this with you guys. This was a lot of fun. Viewers and listeners, I hope that you guys had a good time as well. But until next time.
Hail, hail, hailstone!
Stay stoogey.
Yeah, see